My name is Midge. And that's probably the only thing that's real about me. Once my name would open doors. People would bow their heads, shake hands respectfully, and study my every word. Now I'm barely heard. More often than not, I'm simply ignored. I live in a small house on the outskirts of town, where flowers used to smell stronger than they do now. The roof leaks a little after the rain, the walls are soaked with time, and like me, I'm slowly rotting from the inside. All that's left is the clock on the wall, ticking loudly, as if mocking every second I'm still alive. My children have everything figured out. Careers, cars, social evenings, some new names, new friends. To them, I'm a shadow in the background, an archaism. They call, sometimes. Not because they want to, but because they have to. Conversations are short. Tense. Always looking at the clock, always in a hurry. Dad, I can't now, later. Later doesn't come. My grandchildren are beautiful, stylish, with phones that have their whole lives in them. But not in my eyes. Their gazes pass me by. Once, when I tried to tell you something from my past, in the middle of lunch, my grandson sighed and said, "Grandpa, why do you need all this? It's been irrelevant for a long time." Really? I am irrelevant. Every day begins the same way. I slowly wake up in the silence that I once called peace, and now, loneliness. I drink coffee, look through old newspapers. They still smell of what I lost, a life in which I mattered. I go out into the street, slowly, with a stick that I was ashamed to take for the first 2 years. Now it is my only support. In the store, the girl cashier throws the change without looking into my eyes. I see her glance past me as if I were transparent. The line behind me sighs as I search for pennies. In the hospital, the doctor speaks through me as if through glass. "Well, what do you want, your age? Is that normal? Normal? Normal when you're not heard. Normal when your pain is a statistic. Normal when instead of a name, you have a patient card number. I'm not normal. I'm a living being, with a past, with battles, with victories. But now, I'm just old flesh that gets in the way. I sit down in my favorite old chair, the upholstery of which is sagging, just like my pride. And I feel something rustling in my chest. It doesn't hurt. No. It's something worse, an emptiness. An emptiness that smells like the damp cement of a basement and echoes with the laughter of those to whom I once gave everything. Once I said to myself, it's just age. People forget. Accept it with dignity. But what if those who should remember have chosen convenient oblivion? I don't ask for much. Just a look. A hand. How are you? Not out of obligation, but out of sincerity. But every morning I hear only my own cough, and in the evening, the silence that rings in my ears. And this silence becomes dangerous. Because in this silence, I began to talk to myself. First calmly. Then, a little louder. And then, I began to answer. And I felt, something inside me was waking up. Dark. Quiet. Long-lasting. Like a shadow that was always there, but I pretended it wasn't there. This is not anger. Anger is loud. And this is resentment. It grows into the heart slowly, like rust on metal. And the longer it is ignored, the more deadly it becomes. My name is Midge. And even though you can't see me anymore, I'm here. I see everything. And I'm starting to remember. I sit in a chair and look at the ceiling, as I once looked at the clouds, dreaming of the future. But now all I have left is the past. But there is truth in it. And it is bigger and sharper than today's silence. I was not born strong. I had no inheritance, I had no connections. I only had hands that knew how to hold heavy things, and a head that didn't break when the world pressed down. At 23, I slept in the basement, working 16 hours a day. I drank coffee from a banya, because there was no mug. And when everyone celebrated the new year, I counted debts. My first business was a loader at the market, only over time I became the one who distributed orders. Then I rented a warehouse, opened my first company, invested in logistics, survived bankruptcy. And I survived. I always survived. I was feared, but respected. Because I didn't play at meanness. My word mattered. When I entered the room, conversations stopped. When I was silent, they waited for me to say something. I was not a soft father. But I was present. I fed, protected, taught. And when my son graduated from university, it was my victory. I taught him that honor is more important than profit. And to my daughter, I once said, if they don't respect you, leave. But don't be silent. Never be silent. Now they are silent. About me. I remember carrying my wife in my arms after the operation. How, in the most severe winters, I carried warm clothes to the orphanage myself, secretly, because I didn't need to be thanked. I didn't look for applause. I built. But then everything changed. Not suddenly, but gradually. First she left. Cancer. Quickly, painfully, with no chance of returning. Then friends disappeared, some died, some simply stopped calling. In business, they started saying, the old man doesn't understand modern technology anymore. His time has passed. I left. Alone. So as not to look like a beggar in his own empire. I sold the company. I left it to my children. I said, do as you know. I will live for myself. But when you live your whole life for others, for yourself means emptiness. I was not called into offices. I was not invited to meetings. And I couldn't find a place for myself. Now every morning I see my son speeding past my house in a black Jeep, with a tense face, without even looking out the window. He has things to do. My daughter has an important career, seminars, courses, trainings, podcasts about mental health. But once she said, Dad, you are toxic. You talk about pain instead of moving forward. And I have already passed. When I remember who I was, my heart aches not from pride. From bitterness. Because the one who built is now alone in a ruined temple. I remember how once, back in the 90s, I helped an acquaintance avoid a big problem. I actually saved his life. And a few months ago I saw him in a supermarket, he walked past. He didn't even recognize him. Or pretended not to recognize him. I'm not sure which is worse. Time not only destroys the body. It washes away the memory of your good deeds. Your devotion becomes dust on their souls. And there's only one thing left, to remember yourself. I have a diary. Not a notebook, a diary. It contains dates, names, details. Everything they forgot, I remember. I write it down coldly, clearly, without emotion. Like an accountant counting debts. Some will say, paranoia. And I say, an archive of dignity. Because when love disappears, the record remains. There is a pain that is not visible from the outside. It does not whine, it does not scream. It simply sits next to you and looks you in the eyes when you wake up. Every morning. Year after year. And the scariest thing is that it becomes familiar. I have not asked why for a long time. I just register. March 27th. I fell in the hallway. I felt my legs give way, leaning on the closet. I called my son. 3 times. Then twice more. When he called back 6 hours later, I had already gotten up myself. He said, Dad, why are you panicking? It's nothing serious. I was in a meeting. Nothing serious. Words like horns on a gravestone. April 4th. My grandson brought a new phone, he said, more convenient. I didn't ask. All I wanted was to talk to him. To ask how he was at work, how his girlfriend was. But he just silently placed that black rectangle in front of me and said, "Everything here is intuitive. The trick is not to ask." And left. I pressed the screen for an hour. And only a day later I found out that I had dialed the wrong number. I told him about it. And he laughed. "You're like a child. It's time to teach your grandson, not the other way around." April 11th. I was in the hospital. The new therapist, about 30, didn't even look at me. He read the card and said dryly, "You've had enough, Mikhail Pavlovich. We can support you, but you have to understand that there won't be miracles." I wanted to say that I'm not asking for miracles. I'm asking for respect. But my tongue wouldn't obey. And I nodded. April 18th. I wasn't invited to my grandson's birthday party. They said, "It won't be interesting." I sat in an old jacket in front of the mirror. I was preparing a speech. In my head. I laughed to myself. I imagined that he would come up, hug me, say, "Grandpa, I'm proud of you." But he didn't come. No one came. May 1st. I went to the market, alone, as always. I bought a few apples, bread, and cookies that my wife used to love. I thought I saw an acquaintance, an old friend from the past. He came up, said hello. He looked through me. "Excuse me, who are you?" And I thought for a moment. And really, who am I? In the evening, at home, I opened my diary. And started a new column, deaths. Not physical ones. But those that hurt deeper. 1. An unanswered call. 2. Laughter in the eyes. 3. Silence in the room when you try to speak. 4. Indifference in the doctor's gaze. 5. The words, "You don't understand anymore." They don't know that I remember each of them. As a surgeon remembers every incision, I remember every insult. Calmly. Methodically. Without emotion. Like preparation. And then a moment happened that I will never forget. May 13th. I left the store. I was carrying heavy bags. The wind was stinging my eyes. I tripped, the bags fell, the apples rolled along the sidewalk. I tried to bend down, my head was spinning. I looked around. People were walking by. I held out my hand, "Excuse me, could you?" One of them, a young man in a hood, looked at me, grimaced and said, "It's your own fault. There's no point in old people climbing into independence. Go home, Grandpa." And then someone laughed. A woman next to me. A young woman. The laughter was like a gag in my throat. Warm, humiliating, condescending. I sat down on a bench. Not from the pain in my knees. From the pain in my memory. I looked up at the sky. But God was not there. There was only a gray abyss that devastated me. I returned home, slowly, silently, with broken apples in my hands. And when the door closed behind me, I realized, something had awakened. Not a cry. Not a tear. Cold. Pure as a blade. In the silence of my home now lives not loneliness. And I, the real one. The one they forgot long ago. But who remembers? When I returned home that day, with the crushed apples, my hands were no longer shaking. The fear was gone. The humiliation had evaporated. But something else remained. The silence in the room was no longer just an emptiness. She listened. And I spoke. Aloud. "You didn't help me when I fell. You laughed. You said, 'Go home, Grandpa.'" I took out my journal. For the first time, it wasn't just writing. I began to draw. A diagram. Lines. Names. Facts. Weaknesses. Those who laughed. Those who kept quiet. Those who called me toxic, old, retarded. None of this was an accident. All of it was a choice. And now my choice was to no longer be the person people were after. First, I called an old friend. We hadn't spoken in over a decade. "Do you still remember me?" I asked. "I remember," he replied. "If you're calling, it means something serious." And it was serious. Because in the past that I held so dear, not only memories remained. Tools remained. I once dealt with people who knew how to find out information without the internet, influence courts without lawyers, destroy businesses not with their hands, but with rumors. I was not a bandit. But I knew how to play. Now I was playing. But in a different game. I gathered everything I had. Photocopies of documents, old contacts, passwords to mailboxes, numbers that I had saved, just in case. Everything fell into place, like chess on a board. "You offended me, I will make you see the real me." I did not set fire to cars. I did not break in doors. I was just moving the pieces. My son has a partner, the one who once falsified documents. I gave his name anonymously to the investigative editor. Not my voice. Not in my handwriting. Just a source. A few days later, the investigation began. My son didn't understand where the leak came from. And instead of yelling at me, he started arguing with his partner. "You set me up." "No, you set yourself up." And I was drinking tea. And looking out the window. My grandson, the one who was laughing at me, had an online course on Generation Z values. I found a video of him drunk at a party calling a cleaning lady names. I uploaded it to an anonymous forum. A week later, he lost his contract. Not forever. But enough to feel it. My daughter is lecturing about respecting her parents. And at the same time, she whispers to her friends, "Dad is already inadequate. Difficult. Manipulating." I gave the audio recording of these words to her boss. He heard it, and we had a conversation with her. Now she's on sick leave. She calls me every other day. Her voice is gentle, caring. But not real. And I know it. My anger is not in the fist. My anger is in the details. In the silence. In the random visits, after which life is no longer the same as it was. And no one guesses. They see me in the yard. Old, wrinkled, slow. They smile condescendingly. And I smile back. Because I am no longer a victim. I am a hunter. I was taught that old age is the end. I have proven, it is the beginning of a game in which not strength wins, but intelligence. In every movement, precision. In every reckoning, reflection. No one guesses. And no one will want to know. Because even those who don't believe in old people, begin to fear the shadow that passes by them silently. I don't shout. I act. And while everyone is sleeping, I arrange the figures. I don't destroy. That would be too easy. To put them under the knife is fast, loud, dramatic. No. My revenge is quiet, like the step of a night rain shadow. I don't destroy lives, I show people who they have become. I gathered all my notes. Everything I've written down over the past 2 years. Where they lied, where they humiliated, where they were silent. Not insults, no, facts. Their words. Their actions. Dates. Witnesses. Events. I never had to punish them. I just created the conditions for all their falsehood to surface. And I started to act. I contacted Sergey, the former accountant of my business, whom I once saved from prison. He now works in cybersecurity, a gray consultant. He didn't ask questions when I sent him a list of addresses, mailboxes, and surnames. Is this family? He asked quietly. No, I answered. These are people who have forgotten who I am. He silently agreed. A week later, my son received an email. From no one in particular. It contained bank statements from his partner, with whom he had started working again after the previous incident. Accounts that were openly in violation of tax law. Someone is playing a trick, he said in a phone conversation that I overheard through an acquaintance. No, the partner replied. Someone who wants us to finally tell each other the truth. They had another fight. This time, for good. To my granddaughter, who had been posting motivational videos with fake smiles and beautiful quotes about love for family for several years, I sent a box with printed messages from her. My own. The ones she had made fun of me in chats with friends. She had called me a mummy, an outdated virus of patriarchy. There were screenshots and audio. The caption under the box was short, "Love is true." She deleted her social media in 3 days. She started coming over, silently bringing food, flowers, and cooking something in the kitchen. She doesn't talk, she doesn't know what to say. And rightly so. I didn't punish my daughter directly. I simply made sure that her former colleague, who once stole her ideas for a presentation, suddenly remembered who had helped him avoid a scandal then. It was her. I knew. And he found out. Because of me. The result? She was invited to speak on the topic, on the price of true support. I watched the broadcast. She spoke with tears in her eyes. Her eyes shone. And for the first time in many years, she said, we often ignore those who created the conditions in which we live for us. Sometimes, we forget that gratitude is not a gesture, but a system of coordinates. And I sat in my old chair. And watched. Everyone thought that I had disappeared. That I had broken, settled, turned into a stone under the raft of time. But no. I simply learned to be different. Life taught me this. And this game was not my whim. It was a restoration of balance. I did not change the world. But I made sure that my world would no longer betray me. Acquaintances who had once turned away suddenly began to greet me again. One even said, "Midge, I heard you are in good shape now. You can feel some kind of strength." And I replied, "This is not shape. This is peace." And I moved on. Nobody applauds me yet. No one says, "Thank you, Grandpa, for opening our eyes." And you don't have to. That would be a cheap apology, showy, dead. I didn't want them to apologize. I wanted them to look at themselves, to see what they themselves had repressed: hypocrisy, indifference, slight disdain, a wrapper of beautiful phrases that they used to hide their weariness from me. Now they are silent, but differently. It's not cold. Not mechanically. And with caution. With respect that they do not recognize in themselves. Because they no longer see just an old person in front of them. They see my look. And there is no age in it. It has a memory. They call. More often. They invite, they arrive. Not out of obligation. And with a slight disturbing feeling, the grandfather sees everything. And I see. But I don't judge anymore. I have already done everything I should. My war is over. No shots fired. No noise. Only one resolution. Old age is not a sentence. Indifference, yes. I often sit on the porch. I listen to how the wind touches the trees. And I think. How many people around us are alive but invisible? They were somebody. And they can be again. But we push them into silence. We deprive the last, dignity. And then we wonder why they become different. Why are they silent, but inside they have a storm? Because even the quietest person has the right to respect. And if it is not given, she will take it herself. I learned not to forgive. Not because I can't. And because forgiveness without awareness is a farce. And forgiving indifference is like treating a heart attack with a band-aid. Now, when I walk down the street, I am greeted. In the store, they look into each other's eyes. In the hospital, they speak calmly, with a hint of caution. My children, they have become softer. Not because they became better, but because they saw themselves from the outside for the first time. My granddaughter brought me a notebook. New. She said. If you want, you can start writing something. About life. About us, maybe this will help someone. And I'm already writing. I am writing to you. I'm not a hero. And not the executioner. I am an old person who has been pushed aside. I am the one you all saw and didn't see at the same time. But I reminded myself. Without shouting. No tantrums. No regrets. My revenge was not evil. She was a lesson. Not for them, for everyone. For anyone who looks at an old person as furniture in a room. For anyone who forgot that wrinkles are not a defect, but an archive of experience. For anyone who thinks old age is silence. No. Old age is a force that no longer wants to be silent. And I'm still here. Not like a ghost. And as a reminder. Never despise those who are silent. Because they remember everything. Subscribe and like. And tell your friends about this video.